Welcome back to 8158 Stories of Sacrifice. Today on the podcast, we're joined by Emma, a dedicated EMS professional, adoptive daughter, and mother who opens up about the weight of grief, the toll of trauma, and the strength it takes to keep showing up. From the loss of her father to the emotional storms of working in high volume EMS, Emma shares how her mental health reached a breaking point and how therapy, motherhood, and self awareness helped her rebuild. This is a raw, honest look into the world behind the sirens. If you've ever struggled in silence or supported someone who has, this one's for you. Let's get started.
You're listening to 8158 Stories of Sacrifice, where we honor the bravery of the first responders and the families who stand behind them. Real people, real stories, real heroes. This is 8158. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of 8158 Podcast Stories of Sacrifice. Today's guest, we have Emma, and she is an EMS. She definitely has a very powerful and profound story to tell us. And let's welcome Emma to the podcast. Welcome, Emma.
Hi there. So excited to be here today.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Is this your first time?
This is my first time on a podcast, yeah. So I'm pretty ready to share my story.
Okay.
So yeah.
Outstanding. It's always good to hear the stories from our civil servants and, EMS and everybody that serves our communities, because people need to hear your stories and know what you guys go through,
Yeah, it was really inspiring, seeing some other people get on here and be able to conversate, with you through this platform. So I'm ready. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's good to know. So can you tell us a bit about your background and what your life looks like today?
Yeah, so a little bit about me. I am 27 years old. As far as work goes, I am a paramedic in northern Arizona, kind of the high desert region. If you don't know where Kingman is at, we are actually about an hour away from Vegas, and live kind of right on the heart of Route 66. So this is actually where I grew up. I've been here my whole entire life. As far as my upbringing here, I've had a pretty non-traumatic childhood. No crazy events, that were traumatizing truly happened to me. Now, as far as... So I actually wasn't born here. I was born in Michigan, but was adopted at a very young age. I believe I was 6 months old when I was adopted. So with that being said, my parents did raise me here. I was adopted into a wonderful family, had, a mom, a dad, some siblings, really wonderful childhood. We did a lot of, connecting outdoors. Neither of my parents went to college. Neither of them were in the medical field. So that was kind of new. So yeah, growing up as a young child was just the normal day-to-day. As far as growing up, getting into like the high school years, again, I had a pretty uneventful high school experience. I did all the things that a normal high schooler would do. However, this is kind of where I decided to dabble my feet a little bit into the medical field. The high school I was at the time offered dual credit classes, basically meaning you can be certified in like a trade while also earning your high school credits. So that's what I did. I went and pursued my CNA certificate, and that was basically my first job, right out the gate at like 16 years old. So yeah, the CNA job was, I guess, how you would expect any first-time job to be for a high schooler. It was a lot of learning, taking in a lot of new information, but I loved it. I loved being in the medical field. I think that's where, a lot of my compassion for the job sparked. So let's see. I can't remember how many years exactly I worked as a CNA for. It was about halfway through high school and then a little bit after high school. But I will say, after high school graduation, I also started working part-time on a cattle ranch. This cattle ranch was, ranching was kind of in my family background. My dad's side of the family had a little bit to do with it. But at this point in time, this is when I kind of started doing all the dumb young adult stuff. So, experiencing with alcohol and drugs and not paving a good road for myself. So I actually decided to move away at this time. It was probably a year after graduation. I decided to move away. I went all the way to Louisiana, decided, there's going to be something bigger and better out there for me rather than staying in my small town. So moved away, and then I want to say a few months into living in Louisiana, I was notified that my dad had passed away. So as far as that goes, that's a whole, grieving journey that I was going through at 20 years old. Actually, I was 19. It was a week before my 20th birthday when we found that out. So my dad passed away. At that point, I decided to pack up, come back home, be of assistance to my mother and my siblings that were here, and help with the funeral services and all the things that come along with that. So life basically went back to normal for me once I came back to Arizona. Started working in a medical office, doing eye exams and stuff, and lived a pretty normal life. At this point, I actually got pregnant with my first child. His name is Dawson. He's 6 years old now, which is crazy to me to think that he's 6 years old. But yes, got pregnant, had my child, left an abusive relationship, and then went on a few months just working, minding my business. And then that's when I actually met my now husband. So at this point, I met my husband. We started dating. He was actually in the middle of separating from the military and was just home on leave. And he had told me that he was going into law enforcement. However, he had to go through a whole nother academy because it's kind of different, from military to civilian side of things. Met my husband, dated, was still working. And then this is when I also decided that I was going to get into EMS and start an EMT academy. So both of us almost simultaneously. He's going through a police academy. I'm still kind of here working. And now I'm going to an EMT academy. So both of our schedules are just back and forth. I want to say halfway into my academy is when I found out that I was pregnant with my second child. And, everything was as smooth as it could be. We worked, we went to school, the pregnancy was great, we had our second child. And here we are now. We're working in the field, and we've both been. He's been full time the whole time. I'm kind of down to part time now, but yeah, here we are. We just actually welcomed our third child in September. Thank you. And yeah, I mean, as far as my upbringing, like I said, pretty uneventful. And I mean, I couldn't be any more lucky to have the life that I'm living right now. So.
Okay. So, would you say that in your early years, being adopted, had that changed your identity, who you are in that experience?
I would absolutely say so. Being adopted kind of hits on almost a spiritual level for me, because I know now that I've, taken the time to understand all the feelings that I had in my past. Before, it negatively impacted my identity. Now I can say it positively impacts my identity. I think being adopted can be very confusing for, especially for a young child. I mean, I was told that piece of information growing up. I don't even really remember my parents sitting me down and saying, "Hey, you're adopted." It was just kind of like a bedtime story per se, growing up for me. So there was definitely some, confusion. I know once I got into like the middle school years, kids like to use that to bully people. Oh, your parents never wanted you, or, they'll just say whatever they can. And they definitely like to use that to bully somebody. So as a younger adult or child, yes, it negatively impacted me quite a bit. Now growing up, I think, it was one of the biggest blessings in disguise that could have happened to me, because if I wasn't adopted, then I probably wouldn't be here talking to you today. So
Yeah, you definitely probably wouldn't follow the path that you had.
yeah.
So when did you first begin to notice any signs of mental health struggles?
I want to say, I wish this was a black and white question for me. So I actually remember being a young child and experiencing like my first ever panic attacks. I can remember being on the playground, something happened, got super embarrassed, and would like run off and hide in a corner. So I can kind of date back little things of mental health always being there. But as far as really struggling with it, that wasn't until definitely my dad's passing. Before that, it was kind of just, oh, what are you going to do? Life goes on. I'll just continue on the next day. But when you have something to lose, then it complicates things a little bit more. So yeah, I would say right at my father's passing is really when I struggled with mental health.
Yeah. And would you say that his sudden passing played a role in your personal, professional journey?
Oh, absolutely. I would say because of his passing, I always like to go back to the thing where, everybody has two answers. Everybody in public safety has two answers when they're asked the question, why do you do what you do? I think the first answer to that question, of course, would be like any standard interview question. Oh, I want to help my community. I want to, help people. And then I think the second answer to that question would be because, they have a personal story that can relate to their interest in this field. They had a police officer come and help them at a time of need, or a firefighter, paramedic saved them, or a loved one at one point in time. So at that point in my life, I know that being away from home during my dad's passing was very hard for me. For a long time, I carried around a lot of guilt, being the only, per se medical professional in my family, in my household, and being the only one that wasn't there, during his sudden heart attack, essentially is what happened. So it made me carry a lot of guilt for a lot of years. And I think as I grew and learned from that scenario, that's kind of when I decided that I want to give somebody else's family the chance that maybe my family didn't have. I want to be there for others, in their times of need. So I guess that's kind of the two standard answers. I want to help people, but also I have my story that kind of goes along with it. So.
Right. So basically your father's passing with the onset of the heart attack was the catalyst for you to really want to dive into this and to help other people.
I would say so. I would say, yeah, it definitely influenced, and like you said, kind of was that catalyst into why I decided to take the leap into EMS.
Yeah, make sure that everybody else had a chance.
Right. Yeah, I definitely, I felt like if I could be of assistance and give somebody else a chance that we didn't get to experience, then I would be happy in life if I could do that. So.
Right. So besides feeling guilty about not being there with your dad when he passed, what kind of other emotions were you feeling at that time?
As in like during the passing, or
Yeah, just finding out and then you're not being there.
Yeah, so that moment in time felt like I was drowning. That's the best way I can describe it. Especially being a young adult who has a good relationship with her father. It was just devastating. So, at that specific moment in time, I was actually laying in bed. It was only, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 in the morning. I got a phone call. My mom was hysterical. And I remember her saying, your dad's in the hospital. And, my first reaction was, well, is he okay? Like, what's going on? And, she's like, no, honey, he's gone. Like, he's dead. He had a heart attack. And in that moment, it was just like time froze. So I actually ran outside. I sat on the porch, and then I guess it was kind of a trauma response, because I don't remember much else after that, other than sitting on the porch until the sun came up, just trying to figure out, what was going on, figuring out the grieving process, going through all the emotions. If I were to pinpoint the emotion, it would just be like I was drowning, and just immense sadness, what anyone could expect over somebody's passing. So during that time, I was supposed to go into work that morning. So I made a lot of phone calls, to my siblings and everybody, seeing who was home, who wasn't home. Is somebody there with mom? One of my cousins works for a flight company, and she had already messaged me and was like, hey, I got you on like the next flight out of Dallas. If you can get there, we got you covered. Just go home. So yeah, that was pretty much that moment in time.
So what else was it about the EMS specifically that drew you in compared to the other fields, other than the fact that your father had passed away and you wanted to help people get a chance?
It's funny that you actually asked that question, because before I had left, I was going back and forth of the idea of getting into the military. I knew that, military has great options for educational, endeavors and work endeavors. The reason why I didn't get into the military is because my dad really didn't want me to go. I think it scared him, with his little girl going into this huge male-dominated place. So I decided not to go that route. As far as maybe not looking into, police or fire at the time, it wasn't heavy on my heart. I had no real drive to go into those things. And I also think that because of my crazy background and the drinking and partying, I was like, man, maybe being a police officer isn't for me. I got, I don't think the background quite matches up there.
Right.
So I think it just wasn't heavy on my heart to pursue anything else at the time.
Okay. So EMS was the ticket for you.
EMS was it for me, yes.
That's pretty awesome. We definitely need a lot of EMS out there helping people.
Oh, yeah.
So now that you're a mother, how did becoming a mom affect how you approach the job and connect with your patients?
Becoming a mother definitely gave me that maternal instinct, right? So on a day-to-day work basis, it pretty much obviously helps me connect with all of our tiny little pediatric patients a lot easier. Being a mom definitely affects the way I do my job now. It gives me that maternal instinct, right? I kind of naturally have the ability to speak to these children and get down on their level, to make them a little more comfortable. Even when we have an adult patient and they have, children that are around, sometimes we might, need to be a distraction to the children so they're not in the way. And I would definitely say a lot of my coworkers, yep, Emma, that's going to be your job over there. You go handle the kids. So it's a little bit easier to be with the kids in the field. What I did also notice was, since I've been working in the field for, I'm going on 5 years now, it has made me much more compassionate to the pregnant females, for sure. Something about, getting called to somebody that is pregnant or, having complications or getting ready to deliver, that has been so amazing for me to be there to experience that with them, or to just comfort somebody that's going through that. I know in EMS, when we get a call of, a pregnancy call, most of the time we're not thinking that it's going to be good. We very seldom do we get a good, healthy delivery in the field. a lot of the times you experience, the mothers that are on drugs, the mothers that have had no prenatal care at all. So when I get a call like that, I'm trying not to think of the worst, but most of the time I think I can speak for a lot of providers that we're going to be thinking the worst just in case. So on that level of things, it being a mother myself kind of lets me know what to expect, even in the worst situations. If I'm able to get through it, I know somebody else can get through it. And if they feel like they can't, then I'm going to be the one to help them. So that's definitely also been a huge thing for me since becoming a mother myself.
Now, moving on here, what's life like balancing EMT school, parenting, and your husband in law enforcement and training? How's that working out for you?
Oh man, so what that was like during that time, it almost is like another trauma response, right? You kind of just block it out and forget, how low it was. Hectic would be a good word to describe that. I don't know what we were thinking, both, deciding to tackle both job changes and being pregnant and dealing with kids, but we did it. So it was definitely hectic. I know that when we first started, there was no sense of routine. At this point, we're just kind of rolling with the flow. Hey, I'm going to be on shift on these days, and hey, I'm going to be in class these days. And it helped at the time because we did have a very strong support system behind us. We had family members that could step in and watch the kids if we needed them to. And I think more than anything, we became a lot more grateful for the time home together, because there weren't many days where we were home at the same time. So especially with, I know with his schedule, they're always bouncing back and forth between day shift and night shift. So we just take what little bit of time we have and, capitalize on it and spend as much time as we could with family. I know that I ended up working throughout my last 2 pregnancies up until I couldn't. And I did that. That was a choice of mine. That was by choice.
Okay.
I really just loved my job that much. I didn't want to be sitting at home, doing nothing. So I want to say we took what we have and then we made the best of it. So
how far along were you before you decided that you couldn't do the job until you gave birth?
yeah, so with my second one, my son, I want to say I worked up until I was about 38 weeks. And then that last week I was like, yeah, I can't do this anymore. I remember I was probably around 20 weeks pregnant with him when we got called to our local jail, and long story short, ended up delivering a baby during that call. So that was super emotional for me. And then shortly after that, we hit, I should say 10 weeks after that, somewhere around the 30-week mark, we had a really crazy call. Was a whole lot of stuff was going on in the back of the ambulance there, and I'm standing up by the patient's airway while my paramedic was doing drugs, and I looked up at her and I'm like, I'm contracting right now, and she's like, well, you better hold it in at least for another 20 minutes because we got some stuff to do first. So I think after that, I took it a little bit easier. I definitely tried my best not to put myself into dangerous situations, but in this field, you obviously never know.
Right. So you had a little bit of Braxton Hicks going on.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure.
Imagine that was pretty interesting, being
It
on a
was.
call and having some contractions.
Oh yes. Hmm.
Being for a high volume EMS agency and how that environment has affected you.
Oh man, so working at the volume agency that I was at was
Okay.
a journey in and of itself, I would say. I guess I'll start off by saying, all the pros of working there. It was where I gained most all of my experience. Kind of like I said, we live in the county that I live in is the 5th largest county in the U.S. by square mileage. As far as our town that we live in, we're generally a small town, but our population is rapidly growing. So, as far as like the type of calls we're dealing with, we have, a high density elderly community that always has medical problems. We have very high density of drug and alcohol abuse. Um, we're actually on several major interstates kind of go through our city. So we have our fair share of traumas. Um, there's always something going on. So as far as experience goes, being at an agency that you're having to cover all these different areas, it's where most of my experience came from. Considering this was the first place that I kind of started my EMS career from, I would give a lot of credit to all of my preceptors as well. I was able to meet so many amazing providers here, and I truly wouldn't be the provider I am if I didn't have them as my mentors. So, I mean, yeah, we have the experience was through the roof. The mentorship, I mean, I was able to form such meaningful connections with other providers and other agencies to a point where, it feels like every time I step out to do my job and put my boots on, it's like I get to go say hello to my second family. So, I mean, that's been awesome. Just having that kind of family-oriented family dynamic around, the stations and everything. And with that experience, I would say, so this particular agency is primarily a 911 system. However, they are a part of a large corporation, to where if I were to say it, a lot of people would automatically know what I'm talking about it. But they're actually a large corporation, but in our area, they primarily run 911. However, secondary to that, they also do the IFTs, or the long distance transfers, which basically, takes people from one low functioning hospital to a higher functioning hospital that, may be too far for the patient to drive. So we also got that experience as well. I was lucky enough to come right out of EMT school and then be put on a truck that primarily does 911, and be lucky enough to have an amazing paramedic partner that, pretty much was like a parent to me in my upbringing of EMS. So I would say that those were all of the amazing, the amazing side of working during that time. Now, a few years down the road, you're still running the same amount of calls. You're still dealing with the frequent flyers or day-to-day stuff, and you start to get burnt out. I will say that this particular agency, or really any agency, if I'm being honest, in EMS, has such a high burnout rate and such a low retention rate for their employees. And I feel like that's a talking point that, I want to say quite a bit of EMS providers, they talk about this, and is a part of their story is, I'm burnt out. I can't keep going working under these conditions. As far as, the conditions I'm kind of talking about, it's having to run 20 calls within, the first, your 24-hour shift. Like, that's not a lot of downtime. I want to say my highest call day was somewhere around 19 calls. And that was within a 24-hour period. So not a whole lot of time to rest, not a whole lot of time to take care of yourself and eat. Ambulances are breaking down. You're having to switch into another ambulance that has like 5,000 miles on it. Your equipment is falling apart at the seams. It gets hard to keep a happy face on and do your job. It's even harder when you go to a call and you have to keep that happy face on, and then you're kind of faking it till you make it at that point. Right. And when you get to that point, it definitely starts to wear on you. The morale around the station goes down. Everybody, like I said, they're just faking it till they make it. And at that point, a lot of people forget their why, that those two answers that we talked about. People forget those answers. Why am I here? Why am I doing this job? And it becomes more of just, I'm just going to clock in, do my work, get my paycheck, and go home. So, yeah, I mean, it gets rough. It was amazing, but it gets to a point where it's rough. It's very rough being in EMS, and I think a lot of other providers can kind of relate to that, because I know that's everywhere.
Yeah, we hear that a lot, that there is a high burnout rate, and the retention rate is so high that it's hard to keep first responders in the seat, which is sad. I mean, you'd think that being such an important job, you'd want to make sure that you have trained individuals consistently on the job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that. You would think that, especially for somebody who doesn't know what the job consists of, or you're new and you're starting out, you get into this profession all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and so excited to, do all the things that you've been dreaming of, helping people and creating relationships in like the first responder world, just to slowly lose that spark. It's kind of sad to see, because I mean, I've, at one point in time during this job, I held a training officer position here, so I was able to train the new individuals that were coming in, and it was sad to see, some of the people that were excited to get on the truck and learn and be a part of something turn around just a couple months later and, have that salty attitude already. And some people would look at the new individuals and say, why do you have that attitude? You haven't even been in the field long enough to act like that.
Mhm.
But I think there's another side to that where we need to also be mindful of it and make sure those people feel welcome to share why they're feeling burnt out already, because I don't want to see anybody fail in this career. This career is amazing, and to think that so many people lose their spark so fast it is so sad.
Yeah, it seems like there needs to be more peer support. As a trainer, that could be probably part of it, is trying to be a peer supporter or somebody that is, trying to encourage them to keep that spark.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
And
would
it's
agree.
sad. Yeah. It's sad that, a lot of people get burnt out so fast. That's 2 months is not even long enough to even scratch the surface of what
Mm-hmm.
the job is.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so now I'm going to go ahead and move on to my next question for you. Uh, so, at what point did you realize your mental health was reaching a breaking point? And what are some of the symptoms or moments that made it clear that you needed to seek help?
Yeah, so this question, is inserted right at the right time because, I had mentioned before that I had some signs of mental health struggles when my dad passed.
Mhm.
And before that, it was just, I'll get through it. Other people deal with it. I can deal with it. It didn't start coming to a breaking point until I was about 3 years in with this high volume agency. At this point, I remember I know I was having all of the like typical signs of depression and anxiety, and it didn't occur to me until one day I was actually at work and I accidentally wet the bed. Well, at this time, I truly had no idea, what that could mean. And I went to one of my paramedics and a friend of mine, and I said, "Hey, do you think maybe like I have a kidney infection or like a UTI? Like I have never wet the bed in my life, not even when I had children, not even when I was a child. Like this is so weird for me." And she's like, "No, babe, you need to go to therapy. Like you have trauma. That's what that is." And I'm like, what are you talking about?" And we sat down. I had a conversation with her. This obviously was like a trusted mentor of mine that I've grown pretty close to, and really started to notice the signs of what I was going through. At one point in time at work, I started experiencing sleep paralysis, which was also totally new for me. I would have the nightmares that were, some were relating to past calls, some were not. At one point in time, you know, the rare occasion of me sleeping in bed at work, I actually sleepwalked over to my locker and was like punching it, and my supervisor down the hall actually had to like run and basically snap me out of it. And even after snapping me out of it, they were like, you're gonna go to that call, right? You're next up. And I'm like, I'm not okay right now, I don't think. Like, I'm not taking care of myself here at work. I'm obviously neglecting myself at home, and now I'm just this big ball of trauma that I don't really know how to unravel because I never prioritized mental health, or I guess I even thought that it could happen to me. Maybe I thought I was indestructible at the time and I could just get through everything. And then at that point, it was just, I was so anxious. I didn't want to show up to work. I pretty much just wanted to be a hermit crab at home and not deal with like real life stuff anymore. So at that point is kind of when I had the conversation with some of my close coworkers and my husband, and was like, we need to get you some help. You need to get into some therapy or see a doctor, and go from there, because I don't think you can last much longer, in this cycle that you're in.
Right.
So
And you thought you sought out therapy, right?
I did. And I still go every now and again when I feel like I might need it. The therapist was recommended to me by some coworkers or friends, and she was amazing. I mean, she uncovered the trauma that I didn't know I was carrying around of, me from a child's age. Like, I had no idea that all these things could affect you and you could carry it with you for so long. So it took a lot of work to get better again, especially when you're to that breaking point. Like, how much lower can you go? So it took a lot of work to just be at a functioning level. And part of that was actually leaving my agency.
Okay. So do you think that therapy had changed how you viewed yourself and the work that you do?
Therapy, as far as therapy, I would say a little bit, yeah. I think I realized that a lot more of my peers were struggling with similar things. It made me feel not so alone. As far as how I viewed myself and the work that I do, it made me want to advocate a lot more. And not so much warn, but kind of warn the new people that were coming in, fresh out of high school, and were young and had no idea, what the weight of the job can do to you, especially when you have pre-existing trauma from childhood or whatever it may be. And I think that's why I think your podcast is so awesome, because everybody has this common denominator of mental health, right? And how important it is to use the platform and let them understand what mental health is on our level, from a public safety level.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a little bit different when you're understanding it from just a civilian side of things. So
Yeah, and you definitely are not alone. A lot of our guests have suffered from some sort of mental health issues, whether it's PTSD or panic attacks or PTSI. Now they're calling it, because it's an injury, a brain injury. I myself had suffered a lot of childhood traumas. It didn't rear its ugly head until I was an adult, and I didn't want to face it. And it took a lot of talking to from my fiance, my productions manager. She really talked me into it, because I had really bad panic attacks to the point where it was affecting me physically, mentally, and I mean, after I'd have a panic attack, I would either feel like I was going to pass out, or I'd fall asleep.
Right.
bad.
Right. And I think it also, it takes a level of humility to like lay it all down too, especially to a stranger. And you're like, well, you look like this very well put together professional who's going to tell me about my struggles. Like, that's kind of a hard pill to swallow at first when you walk into therapy too. It's like, how are
Right.
you going to know the trauma that I've seen? You know, so it definitely, I remember the first time I had to like talk myself through a tough call, and pretty much like relive it, how much better I felt afterwards, just sharing that with somebody,
Mhm.
rather than keeping it in. And I think that, you know, that was just a humongous difference in the beginning of my therapy journey.
We will return after this quick ad break.
The William H. Bill Butler Jr. Foundation is on a mission to honor first responders and support those who serve. We provide scholarships for families who have lost a hero in the line of duty, offer second chances to juvenile offenders who are working to rebuild their future, and help new recruits pursuing careers as first responders. Through generous donations and the sale of merchandise, we're building a community that uplifts, empowers, and creates lasting impact. You can be a part of this mission as well. Visit 8158podcast.com to donate or shop today. Together, we can support those who serve, honor those we've lost, and give hope to those who need it most. Behind every badge is a story, and behind every story is a sacrifice. This is the 8158 podcast, where we honor the lives and legacies of first responders and their families. If our mission speaks to your heart, if these stories move you like they move us, join us on Patreon. For just $5 a month, you'll get ad-free listening, exclusive merchandise, behind-the-scenes content, and video episodes only available to our patrons. This isn't just a podcast, it's a movement, and you can be a part of it. Support us at patreon.com/8158podcast. Let's continue to share the stories that deserve to be heard.
And now, I mean, I'm to the point where I'm still medicated, so that seems to help quite a bit with anxiety or depression that I might experience on a day-to-day basis. I was lucky enough to find something that worked really well for me, and we're 2 years, a little over 2 years in now, and now I'm able to recognize if things start going south again. So
Yeah.
it that I think that's why it's important to speak on the mental health. That way, if others don't know the signs yet, they can pinpoint them early and get help before they have to even figure out what their breaking point is.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, I've had them so much that I can recognize when I'm having them. And I'm a truck driver, so basically I'm able to pull over and to go through that. And there was a breaking point to where I had to actually turn around and head back to my yard. And then I couldn't make it back. I pulled over and I called my boss.
Mm-hmm.
I said, I can't do this today. I'm having a really bad panic attack. And he goes, You okay? You okay? And he goes, Just sit where you are. We got somebody coming to help you.
Mm-hmm.
And they got me. Fortunately, Brianne had got me in to see the doctor right away.
Mm-hmm.
Because it feels like you're having a heart attack. And it's
Yeah.
the roughest thing to go through. We definitely found the right medications that balance everything out. So whenever I feel like something's coming on, I'm able to take some of my medications that kind of mellow it out. And
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the job that I work for are very understanding, and you know, they really like having me around. So
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, that's for sure. Those panic attacks are brutal, and I'm very glad that you are in a position where you feel cared about by your employer, because that's a whole nother side of the public safety world. Like the agency that I was talking about previously, they could watch somebody go through this horrible experience and then be so quick to say, well, your next step, are you going to take that next call? And
right,
you can't, at that point, you can't take care of other people if you're not taking care of yourself. If you're not healthy and in the right mind too, that's just, it could end up as a liability on so many levels.
oh, absolutely, I
Yeah.
believe it.
Hmm.
I definitely believe it. I've lived it, and so I could see it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, so, what does PTSD look like in the real life for someone in EMS beyond what people might expect?
This is a good one. This is a good question. So oh man, what does PTSD look like in real life beyond what people would expect? Um, I would say a lot of the times the standard answer of, what's wrong, and somebody says, I'm tired, or like they look like they're staring off into nothingness, like
Mhm.
something's probably going through their head, right? Like normal people, they struggle with mental health. Absolutely, there's no doubt. Um, but our new normal is seeing some horrific stuff. Like our job isn't um, sitting, at a desk and going over numbers. Like our day to day is seeing somebody's worst day, like seeing tragedies happen. So it's very easy to replay those scenarios in your head. And when like one of my family members would ask me, like, are you okay? What's going on today? I can't answer that truthfully sometimes. There's no way that I'm going to tell them about the call that I experienced the night beforehand. Um, so I think it's very easy for, as far as PTSD symptoms, I think it's easy for us to disassociate. Um, that would be my main thing. A lot of the times, if we're walking, around living our normal life, but sometimes it feels like we're floating, and we're thinking about other things, but we're still keeping that normal face on for the public. Um,
Right.
it's much easier for us to just disassociate than um, project our traumas onto other people, especially people that have no idea. Um, yeah, I mean that one would really be the big one for me. What it was disassociating. Um, I know a lot of people, they can fall into like the drinking habits. Um, at one point in time, our whole shift was like going and getting breakfast beers after almost every shift, just because we were down so bad at one point in time. Um, so, I mean, I think people handle it in different ways. Um, and there's signs. There's signs for everybody. Um, as far as like seeing it in real life, though, I'd say my biggest symptoms that I would look for is like the disassociating, maybe like the dipping into the bad habits like drinking, um, pushing themselves away from loved ones. That's a real
Mhm.
big one. They'll not keep in contact with their friends anymore or cancel all their plans all the time. I think those are all pretty obvious red flags of like, I think they're going through something.
Right. Absolutely. I went through it for years, and that's one of the things that I learned, and I wasn't going to sacrifice my relationship that I have now for that, because I understood that, I was pushing people away because I didn't want them to get involved. And I didn't want them to know what was going on with me, because I was so ashamed and embarrassed, and because I'm supposed to be this very strong person,
Mm-hmm.
because I was strong for everybody, strong for my family, strong for my children, and I was, seen as this very strong person. So it's hard to admit that you need help.
Yeah, I totally relate to that. I mean, as far as my symptoms went, it was like at home, it was the disassociating, just keeping a happy face because, again, I have to be a support person for, several tiny children at home too. I don't want them to see the ugly side of me. And as far as when I went to work, then, that's when like the sleep paralysis came out and the sleepwalking and the more physical signs came out. And that was probably just my body's natural way of saying, you know, we're going to keep you strong at home and you can break down while you're at work. So.
Right. So now, being in a dual first responder household, how has that affected your support system during your hardest times?
For me, I've been extremely thankful for it. My husband was my biggest supporter, and really pushed me to get the help when I needed it. And it's funny because whenever we were going through, like his police academy, and I'm not sure if other, public safety people can relate to this, but I know that people always try to scare you with statistics, right? And I have this burned into my brain and I'll never forget it. They told us that 40% of marriages in, in the public safety realm experience domestic violence within their own household.
Mhm.
And I think it was like, 20% of that being law enforcement or, vice versa. And there's all these statistics to try to scare you of like, oh, your marriage is going to fail if you're in public safety. And you hear other experiences from other people. They try to scare you into thinking that you're going to have a relationship to not be successful like theirs were. But on my side of things, it strengthened our marriage a lot. I think it gave us a mutual sense of understanding, of coming home after work, and sometimes we're able to talk about our day and our calls and how everything went. And sometimes it's just a simple look and it's like, yeah, well, maybe talk about that later when you're ready. So as far as being in a dual first responder household, I've been so thankful for it. We definitely didn't let the stigma of, public safety marriages and relationships get to us. I mean, he was able to get me the help I needed when I needed it. So
That's pretty awesome. You're very fortunate in that aspect, and kudos to your husband for being your support system. You guys can be there for each other, and you don't fall into the statistic of the the physical violence or the divorce rate. because I know that these jobs are very hard and there's a high divorce rate within your fields, whether it's law enforcement or EMS or firefighting and all that stuff. And it's definitely pretty hard.
It is hard. It is very hard. I think we made the decision not to be intimidated by that. I think we both, we knew but didn't quite understand how difficult our jobs were already going to be. There was no use in, fighting with each other over anything. And it's funny because we always have this friendly banter, right, of like fire versus police. Who's cooler, who's better. So, I mean, that's always fun. But, I mean, we even have good relationships with each other's coworkers. We hang out with a lot of his coworkers and their families, and our kids are friends. And, my husband and my kids are able to come over to the station and have dinner with us, and, all the guys and gals that are on shift. So, it's definitely work. It takes work to ignore the outside haters for sure, but it's been worth it for us, especially when we have kids. Then it's a whole different story. So,
Right. Well, like I said, you're definitely very fortunate and blessed to have that support system. So
I would think so too. Yes.
yeah. Has your experiences made you more empathetic or changed how you connect with your patients and coworkers?
Absolutely. I mean, even just from sometimes I feel like even my trauma and my experience is small compared to other people's experiences. And that right there, I mean, makes me want to. I like living by the quote where they say, everybody's going through something. And not everybody's, is going to be out and open with you about what they're struggling with. So I think it's important to be, patient and gentle with people because they might need it that day. We might be seeing them on their worst day and we don't even know it. Some of these experiences and calls are very obvious that they're having the worst days of their lives. But I think there's something to be said about the person who is also having the worst day of their life. They're just not showing it. So I think it's made me a lot more gentle of a person, especially being in this field. We definitely turn hard and cranky and bitter for sure. I think we've all been there. But the healed side of me is definitely more gentle and compassionate, and I don't want to ever trigger somebody. I would rather just be that listening ear and be able to help them. And if I can't help them, then maybe give them a resource that can do that for them. So I would absolutely say yes.
So how did you feel and what did you learn from stepping away from a toxic work environment, the one that you were previously in?
I mean, that was a scary time. That was a very scary time for me because I knew that I needed to step away from it for sure. I knew that it was necessary, but I was so scared because, like, I have kids at home to take care of. How are we going to make this work? Not only did I have kids to take care of at the time, but this is also when I was going through my paramedic class. So I'm working full time. I'm being a full-time mom at home. And then I'm also in class and then doing paramedic clinicals on top of it. So I had no room to breathe during this time whatsoever. Not even, I would maybe have one single day off a week. this is kind of, if I were to have dug down deep and realized what is the source of, my mental health struggles right now, it all went back to the job. If I eliminated the job, then I would actually have time to eat and sleep and get myself ready for class. I wouldn't miss another, one of my kids' events. I would be there for everything. So I definitely learned that doing the right thing for myself at the time was one of the scariest decisions of my life. That would have been the biggest thing that I learned from that time.
Now, being out of that toxic work environment, how do you manage your mental health now while still working in EMS and dealing with your family? I know you take medications and stuff, but what other measures do you take to kind of deal with that process?
Yeah, so I definitely still take my medications. And I would say, so now I am currently a part-time paramedic. With that, I am able to choose my hours, choose what days I want to work. And I'm actually working at 2 different agencies right now. I'm working at a tribal agency, and I'm working at my local city fire department. And both of those have been amazing. And I would say it has helped my mental health immensely by stepping down part-time. I think what I realized is that, first responders do have priorities other than their job. A lot of the times people just think of first responders as heroes, across the board. They're heroes at work, they're heroes at home. There's just this stigma around what a first responder would look like. And I realized that my priorities weren't just at work. I needed to be there for my children. And in order to be there for my children, I needed to take a step back from work. So I'm working part-time. Every now and again, I'll pick up full-time hours because I like working 24-hour or 48-hour shifts. It actually works really well for our family dynamic now. Over the years, we've gotten really used to working the shift work. So when I'm not working shift work, it's almost weird for us now. But so yeah, definitely taking a step back from the workplace, and pretty much just connecting to the hobbies that, make up everything I am. So we're in the gym a lot. Physical fitness is a huge thing. I wish that was more prevalent for EMS, but that was also another thing, is that nobody prioritized physical fitness in the EMS world. I mean, at my other agency, they even discouraged working out on shift. So being able to work out and get your body and your mind moving is great. It's just the family time, and we've been doing a lot of running lately, trying to work our way up to a marathon. So that's been kind of fun.
Awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean,
Yeah, working out is very good for you, especially for your mental health.
oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, before, like I said, we weren't allowed to do it on shift because it was a liability at our old agency. So, I mean, at that point in time, we would get home and be too dead to even go to the gym and wouldn't even make it. So,
Right.
mm-hmm.
Well, hopefully someday you'll be able to run a marathon.
Oh man, I'm torturing myself just trying to get there, but one day.
Yeah, you will. Just keep at it, keep practicing.
Mm-hmm.
You'll get it.
Yeah.
So, what advice would you give to another first responder who might be suffering in silence or struggling?
If I could give any first responder a piece of advice who might be silently struggling, oh man, this one's a kind of a hard one, right? Because again, we go back to like the standard, you're not alone, right?
Right.
But to some degree, that is so true. Like, you're really not alone. There are so many people that have felt like they can't breathe and that they can't talk to anybody. It's so, there's so many more people struggling with the same stuff. So I think it's important to not feel like an outcast. It doesn't make you weak. You know, you're not an outcast. I think it's important to get it off your chest and find somebody or, you know, a resource that you might be comfortable sharing your struggles with, because we don't want to see, you know, things get worse. Wherever you're at now, we don't want to see you get worse. So I think it's important to remember your why, even when you can't remember and you're in the trenches and you have the worst mental health of your life. Just don't forget the why. Why are you doing your job? You know, what made you get into this profession in the first place? I think that would be my piece of advice: is remember your why.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have been connected with some peer support groups, and we have a lot of resources that we can give out to people if they feel like they need some help or want to be anonymous. If they don't feel comfortable talking with their coworkers, they could always contact us, and we could get them connected to some peer support groups that might help them.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's so much more than meets the eye when you see somebody in this field. We have no idea what people may be struggling with. So I think that's awesome that there's even an anonymous option on there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because a lot of times, responders are in fear of losing their jobs
Mm-hmm.
because, that stigma of saying, oh, there's something wrong with you, then you can't handle the job, then you can't work here anymore.
Right.
And that's not right. It's not fair. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the first responder is incapable of doing the job. They just need the extra help with dealing with the traumas so they can get over the traumas and move
Absolutely.
forward. Yeah.
I even had a supervisor at one point in time tell me, well, maybe this job isn't for you. And I mean, that definitely has stuck with me because you know what? This job is for me. This is why I do what I do. And just because, I'm in a hard spot right now doesn't change the way that I'm able to take care of somebody in the back of a truck or, dry their tears off when they're in a moment of crisis. So yeah, I mean, the stigma is just insane around mental health.
Yeah, we hope that we can make a lot of change in that and shed some light on that and work with some people to kind of make it towards departmental policy to have more understanding and maybe have more outreach within the departments, uh, and make it harder for them to terminate somebody from, you know, having to deal with mental health issues.
Right.
Having mental health issues isn't always bad.
Mm-hmm.
It's just something that somebody has to get over. They just need a little help.
Right.
That's simple.
It's no different than illness that somebody may be getting treatment for either,
Yeah, exactly. So, looking ahead in your life, uh, what are your goals, personally, professionally, or both?
Um, as far as my goals, I can say that I don't see myself leaving um, public safety. I absolutely love being a paramedic. Um, in some way, being a paramedic is almost like part of my identity. It's part of who I am now. Um, as far as where I'd like to be, I mean, um, obviously, I would still love to be a paramedic. Now, I'm not sure if that means, looking into flight in another year
Mhm.
or, you know, moving up to a different department. Um, I know one thing that I have been working towards is finishing my prerequisites for being a physician assistant. So that is something that's been a goal of mine for a while. Um, when that time comes, I definitely see myself, maybe dwelling within emergency medicine or, um, maybe labor and delivery because those are the two things that are very dear to my heart.
Mhm.
Um, we're actually, my family and I are getting ready to pack up and move to Texas here soon because he accepted a job there. So we're kind of navigating that a little bit. And I mean, I want to, if I were to think of like personal goals, I want to I want my kids to be proud of me, as they grow older. Um, I want them to understand that life can be hard sometimes and, you know, there's things you can do to keep yourself healthy through those challenges. Um, so yeah, I mean, just being a good mother and a good public servant to whatever community I may reside in is my ultimate goal.
Pretty awesome. I commend you for that, and I really wish you the best on everything you do. And I'm sure that whatever you decide to do in your future, you're going to make it, and you're going to do great things with it.
Well, thank
So
you for
I really believe that. I mean, you've come this far. What's stopping you from going further?
right. I know it's crazy to think that I am where I am today, and it's like that imposter syndrome that you might hear people talk about. I mean, that happens all the time for me. I'm like, how am I here?
Right.
Yeah,
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, it's hard to believe sometimes, but you just got to remember you did it. You did it on your own, and you
yeah,
made yourself successful. I come from a very, very hard background, and nobody expected me to make it to where I am today. But you know what? I fought hard and I made it.
right.
You know,
It's
I
definitely
own my
something
own
to be
house.
proud of.
Yeah, I mean, I own my own house. I have a pretty good job, and a beautiful fiance, and we pay our bills, and we live the best life that we could possibly live.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, anything you put your mind to, you could do it. Trust me, from
Yeah.
experience.
I hope my kids remember that too as they grow older, because I know they're going to have their own struggles. I wish everybody had just lived a perfect life, but I hope
Yeah,
that my experience can, help be an example to them when they have to face something hard. Um,
right.
so, because I know it'll happen eventually. I'm sure it will.
I know it's one of the things that sticks out that my mom used to say. God rest her soul, but she used to always tell me. She said, "Son, you could do anything you put your mind to," and she was right. I didn't believe in myself. I didn't believe, at that time, but
Mhm.
as I got older, I started thinking about it, and I'm like, yeah, I can do that. I just
Yeah.
started pushing harder and harder and harder, and this is where I am today.
Right.
As far as the podcast, I'm not like a super social person, so doing this podcast was very hard for me. But with the passing of my cousin, it kind of provoked me to break out of my shell and to, honor his memory by doing
Right.
this in his name. So, uh,
Yeah, that's
so
awesome. I
yeah,
mean,
it's
I
been
think,
a journey for me too.
yeah, what you got going on here is great. I think that the platform and everything is just awesome. And I hope it continues to just grow and grow,
Yeah, we're working on that, and we definitely appreciate guys and gals like you that come on here and share their stories. I know it's super hard to share some personal stories about yourself and some of the things that happen, and it was hard for me too. I, I was like the first interview. I had my fiance interview me, and I had to talk about myself and my whys and my background and all my history and stuff, and it was hard, because I didn't want to face it, but that was the start of it, and
Right.
people see the struggles and where I came from. It should be some encouragement to them, like with your struggles. It should be encouragement to them to step forward and to speak out and to want to be successful in life and move forward instead of
Yeah.
falling back and dwelling in the depression and all that negative
Yeah.
stuff that comes with it.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it goes to show and to remind people that, like I said, there's more than meets the eye. You could be walking around with your coworkers or like you look at me and I just look like this small, happy go lucky girl, that's just living her dream, being on an ambulance, and people wouldn't have any idea of what my story, holds and
Hmm.
how it's shaped me as a provider. Um,
Exactly.
so I think it's super important to remember that everybody does have a story, and that's why I think this podcast is so awesome for giving people the chance to share their story is just amazing.
Appreciate that, and we definitely appreciate having you on here. It's an honor. It's definitely an honor for us to have you on here. Um, my heart goes out to you for what you've been through, but also I am happy for your success.
Right. Well, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed, our time on here, and I hope that somebody somebody resonated with something on here. That would be cool if somebody took something away and was able to reflect on it, after listening. So,
I'm sure people will. A lot of people see the TikToks and we post clips and stuff like that on TikTok and stuff, and
right.
uh, the videos will be on Patreon, and also this will be aired on the podcast feed. So everybody that listens, I mean, there's a lot of people that do listen. We looked at our stats, and we pretty much have listeners pretty much all over the world now.
Right. It's awesome.
It was amazing. I was like, what?
Right. It's like something you would never expect. It's so crazy.
Yeah, it's an awesome thing, and it's a good feeling, and it helps me heal too, to not only honor my cousin's memory, but to help other people, and allow them to have their space to kind of talk their stuff out and give them a platform to just kind of let all that stuff out. And
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I can't wait to listen, and tune into all the other guests that you might have on here. So, super excited for that, actually.
yeah, yeah, we have quite a few out there. Um, I think the last one that played was number 37. That would have been Matthew Tamplin. He was a firefighter, EMS, and he now works for hospice.
Yeah. It's quite the journey.
Yeah. So, well, I definitely have an admiration for you, and I appreciate you being on here. And that is all I have for us today. Hopefully, further on in your career, you'll be able to come on here and just tell us where you're at and how you're doing, and
Mhm.
give us some more of your experiences.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I mean, I'll keep in touch and see you guys on the socials. So,
Yeah, we're always on TikTok, so that's our
oh yeah,
primary thing: TikTok, Facebook, Instagram.
right.
But we're always on TikTok.
Cool. Yeah, I'll share your stuff with everybody so they can also tune in.
Yeah, have them listen to your episode and check it out
Yeah.
when it comes
Well,
out.
thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Everybody, this is Emma, EMS, and we definitely love and honor and appreciate everything she's done for her community. And this is 8158 Podcast Stories of Sacrifice. Have a good night, Emma.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye. Thank you for joining us on 8158 Stories of Sacrifice. Every story we share is a tribute to the courage and resilience of first responders and their families. If this episode impacted, encouraged, or inspired you, please subscribe, leave a review, and share with someone who supports first responders. Follow us on all social media platforms at 8158 Podcast for updates. 8158 Stories of Sacrifice is a team effort. Rico brings the stories to life through casting, writing, original music, and editing. Brianne Shipley as production manager, handling booking, social media, graphics, promotion, marketing, website management, and logo design. Please visit our website at 8158podcast.com. For questions, collaborations, or to share your story, our email address is contactus@8158podcast.com. Until next time, let's continue to honor the legacies and remember the sacrifices of those who serve, every brave man and woman on the front lines, protecting and defending us all. This is Rico signing off and honoring 8158.